I'm Sean Shepard, and welcome to the Power of Five. The Power of Five brings together 5 behavioral change specialists from around the world. We talk about all good things leadership, management, what's working, what's not, and hopefully you'll have some fun watching this and leave with some tips. Today, I'm really proud to welcome Jim Kaloutas from Colludas in beautiful Boston, Massachusetts. Jim is an entrepreneur who is dedicated to learning and growing. He strongly believes that when you invest in yourself, and more importantly, your team, it equals business results. Words to all of our ears here, Jim. He is the founder and owner of Colludas, which is a leading commercial painting and industrial flooring and fireproofing company and serves all of New England. So first of all, Jim, welcome to the Power of Five.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Welcome.
So let me start with that, because I've heard you say that so often, that the learning and growing and investing in yourself and your team, you wouldn't do it any other way. So can you tell me a little bit more about how you developed that philosophy?
Well, for me, I think it was out of survival, right? I made it through high school. My sister did my college applications and I got into university, as you Canadians would call it. And, you know, I didn't go far. I made it for about a month. So then at that point, I had to reinvent myself. So it was about of taking courses, you know, whether it was college courses, whether it was seminars, and just keep investing in myself. And then once I got that momentum going, I realized that, you know, how do I keep it going and then share it with everybody else on the team? And that helped pave the way for our continued success.
So tell me a little bit, when you're hiring somebody and part of the process, you really want to hear about what their future vision is, and tell me why that's so important.
Well, I think sometimes we always ask the people, the question is like, hey, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I don't know if that question actually works, but getting people to think of a bigger future is important. And if people can think of themselves in a bigger role or have the aspirations, I've heard it from, I think it was Dan Sullivan that said, you're much better off dealing with someone that has batteries included rather than batteries not included, because they're bringing their level of motivation. And if they have that energy, you can do a lot with it. And they don't have to know your industry, but they're committed. They're willing to, like, you know, put the time and effort into what it is that they need to learn.
And you said Dan Sullivan, so I know you've been in strategic coach for how many years?
I think I'm working on 17 plus years.
So 17 years investing in yourself. You're also in EO for how many years?
EO's probably a little bit longer. I'm on my 18th year there.
18th year. That's pretty impressive. And then can you tell me about some of the ways that you get your team involved in professional development, coaching, and training?
Sure. I think I had a personal coach and I was working through that. And, you know, it was a matter of like, I was doing everything myself. So I'm trying to drive the bus, and I realized that I needed help to drive the bus. So, you know, my coach had suggested, how do I invest in some of the other people? So we decided to build a management team. We decided to like expose them to Vistage, to their own coaches, or bring a trainer in-house and start growing everybody else, because you probably have heard the saying, it's lonely at the top. And I think at times we just want to hold on to everything and drive the bus ourselves. And it's so much easier to let everybody help you. And if you don't invest in them, it's almost like, you know, you feel like you need to take back the wheel because they don't have what it takes to drive the bus for you. Well, that was my own fault for not investing in them. And it took me a little bit to be comfortable with the people, to, you know, put the time and effort into them. But once I realized and got that momentum, it was a no-brainer. Let's keep going with this.
And what's the difference to your business outcomes when you invest in your own team?
So there was a lot of dynamics that played into it, because I think as I started to invest in them and we started to solve problems together, there was a huge level of trust that started to build in. Like when you start, you know, investing in someone else, you know, they feel it and they're so, you know, much more loyal or committed. But, you know, we've been very fortunate to have grown the company from nothing, you know, 34 years ago to, you know, we're in the mid 20 million this year.
That's amazing. So I have one more question before I let the floodgates
Oh
loose
boy.
with
Oh
my
boy.
other four colleagues here. But one thing I do want to say, now I work with your management team and phenomenal. Like sometimes we talk about culture and we get overblown. The culture at Colludas is amazing. And we were in a session and just how open the sharing was, how open the communication was, how there was none of this cover your own butt club, making ourselves look good. And everybody, the way that they talked to each other was so refreshing. At the end of the meeting, I said that to all of you. And I think you said, well, that's all we know. So can you talk about that culture and how do you because a lot of companies would love to have that. How do you foster that?
That's a tough question. I guess, where do I start? I think there's an aspect of you just be yourself, and we've just grown up that way, right? So all of us, you asked me how long I had been in those programs. Some of the things you didn't ask me is how long I've worked with some of the people that I'm working with, and we're going on, 12 years, 14 years, 16 years, 18 years that I've worked with some of these people that have been entry level. They came in as receptionists or bookkeepers, and they've been able to grow themselves to pretty key positions. And I think it's that level of, if you shared those moments that you're scared, if you shared those moments that you don't know what you're doing, or you need someone's help to write a letter, and you're that vulnerable, you get to open up and now get the help because you're real and you're being authentic. And I think that's the stuff that we've grown up with. And again, I've been working with these people for call it 12 to 16 years. And, I've been at this for 34 years. So I had all those scary moments by myself, and it's way better now, being surrounded by these talented, ambitious people.
Good. I'll let the floodgates open. I think Joel Bennett, we have a question from Joel.
Oh, I love having you on, Jim. I love kind of the blue collar trades, people after my own heart, and I do a lot of work there. And I love the fact that you're making investments in your people, both in their own development and just in the culture that you've created there. I'd be interested, you talked about how you work with your management team on that, but how do you try to drive that leadership message down, all the way down to the front lines of your employee base, or the front lines of your managers, those folks that are kind of your first level managers? How do you make sure that they understand not only the culture, but how important it is to lead well?
That's pretty deep, and I don't know if I'm that good to be able to do that. I think it's shown by example that, one, they matter. I don't know if it was because of my parents and how I was raised. You treat people like a human being. You know their name. At least before COVID, you shook their hand. And those simple things of when you see them out on the job site, I get excited about going out to the front lines and seeing, the team and seeing everybody out there working, to just acknowledge them and just thank them for what they put in. And it's so and I get this for feedback from them, that it's so refreshing to be working in that, call it a simple environment, because most bosses, from what they've experienced, never gave them the time of day. And I think my belief, and again, it's because I started from nothing. My dad was a union painter that kept getting laid off, and that's how we started the business. But it's really that piece. Like, I think of it, my dad and how he was treated, and as if I'm working with my dad. So it makes no difference if it's my dad or one of my other employees. You treat people in that manner, and that's just resonated. And we've been fortunate that I don't know if it's all the cool kids got kicked off the bus and now it's just us. And we look out for each other, and it goes all the way down to the front line. I know this is probably the past couple of years has been the first time that I don't know everybody's name, and that bothers me at times, but I work through it, and I just get out there, and I have to do a little bit of research before I go out there. But it's those little things that, as I said before, it makes a difference.
Yeah, and what I love about that, Jim, is I think for a lot of business owners who start small and grow their company, there does become a bit of a tipping point where they can't see the whole business, they can't know everybody's name, but the ones that do it well, and I put you in this category, the ones that have equipped their managers, their leadership teams with that same thought process, so that they do, right? And so it doesn't have to be leadership through one person where there's a bottleneck at the top. You've really created a culture that allows those leaders to do what you're doing every day for the people that they manage and lead. So kudos to you.
Thank you. You're kind.
Yeah, I agree. Totally kudos. It's inspiring to hear you. I think one of the things that I'm curious about also is that, you know, it almost feels like you're a family, you know, and you treat people like family. But like when you do that in the business world, some leaders have found it difficult to have the hard conversations, especially manage performance, you know, all that. How have you gone with that? Because that's tough, and especially, you know, learning about it and being able to then do it. Yeah.
I've had to learn, because I've been one of those people that always avoided the tough conversations. And I think as I matured and have been around it, and to realize that if I am truly want to do right by them, and that's one of our values, do right by people, I need to have that difficult conversation, because I'm failing them. And that's really what helps me get through that nervousness or that uncomfortableness of having that conversation, that my core value is to make sure I do right by them. And I have to give them this feedback, you know, positive or negative.
Yeah, no, that's great. I've always framed myself, you know, that's the only way you can be kind to someone. And yeah, very, very
100%.
true.
Love that.
Very true.
Yep.
Yeah. Thanks, Jim.
Cool.
Jim, you mentioned your parents and your dad specifically, and I have a question. You've talked about how you've supported your folks, you know, for the past 34 years.
Mm-hmm.
But as you were coming up, other than your parents, who was your mentor? Who was the one that was actually supporting and encouraging you to strive and to learn and to fail and to keep moving?
Ooh, you know, I never thought of it like that. So I think, you know, along the way, the journey, there's always been people. I think back because I had an uncle, and that's who my dad worked for. He was a business owner. You know, I've always found myself around older people. I think in my early 20s, I was part of a local community group called the Colludas, and it was me, a 20-year-old, hanging out with these 60 and 70-year-old guys and just listening to their stories. I've always had that thing of that natural curiosity of go find the person for them to tell you the story. And that's helped me so much, because it was a matter of like, all right, I want to be a little bit more like them. I want to be a little bit less like them. And it was always cueing that in. Yeah, I think it was just a curiosity to learn and grow. I think the whole aspect of wanting to have a business was curious. It was something that I wanted to do. But the one thing that my dad did at a very young age for me was he brought me along because I spoke better English than him. So that was, you know, I was helpful for him to do his side work. But the thing that my dad did for me was that when we did a side job together, we paid all the guys, and then whatever money was left over, we split. And because for him, it was just side work, but that caused me to learn transactions. Yeah. And then I think that was probably one of the early, and I don't think he meant to do it, other than he knew he didn't want to take advantage of his kids. And it was just one of those things that helped me start to pick up on it. So
yeah, leadership in action. And you know, it's interesting that you connect to learning from, I'll call them the elders, because I do think that that's possibly a gap. Certainly I notice it, that there's some very hard lines between generations these days. And I'm not sure that young people really see the value in some of the older folks. And even the fact that at 65, people are like, you should be retiring, like make way for the new ones. There is so much wisdom and so much gold in them hills that even that story alone could be so meaningful for people, to encourage them to talk to people who've been there, who've gone through the fires before, who can tell the stories and share. So I think that's really, really cool that you had that foresight and the curiosity to ask the questions and to kind of notice as you were learning, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always, a couple of things that my learning that comes from, I have two peer groups that I learned from: my painting peer group, which is a bunch of other contractors from around the country, and then my EO peer group, which is just different businesses. But, it's interesting to learn from each other. But the early days, the biggest thing that I got out of that was the confidence, right? I was hiding because I didn't have the confidence and I wasn't being real with myself. And once I realized that we're all in it together, we're all struggling in some way, shape, or form, or we don't feel we have what it takes, we little by little got confidence from each other. And that's what we brought forward. So it is little pieces like that.
Yeah, connection.
Yep.
Jim, listen, I love hearing these stories, and I think that your approach is dynamite. And I love your analogy of the bus, right? Because I always think there's three positions. You're either driving the bus, you're on the bus, or you're under the bus. So pick your spot. And so, you know, it seems like you've got such a beautiful culture there where things are going well, and you know, we're describing it as family and so on. And what I've noticed, you know, working with leaders is sometimes then we get into this culture of nice, right? Where harmony is there and everyone's feeling it. And so when you have to actually get into the grit, right? Like when there's got to be a dispute or you want people to be able to challenge back and forth, sometimes that culture of nice can get in the way and people just want to go along to get along. Do you have any tips that you can share with leaders as to how do you get to the good stuff? How do you make sure that people are still challenging and you know, coming forth with the truth and you know, making sure that they, you know, challenge when challenge is due?
Yeah, that's hard because I always am wary of that. I don't know if you remember the Sopranos episode where Tony Soprano laughed at everybody or made a joke and everybody laughed at his joke, but it wasn't really funny. So I'm always wary of that if they're just agreeing with me. I think a lot of times what I'm doing is to just back up and let people take the stage and let them go out on the skinny branches and let them experience it and have them, you know, come up with the answer. And that's probably in the last couple of years, I've noticed myself not to answer first, because I think that's always been the go-to for me. So I've tried to back up a little bit and let other people come up with their answers. And let them think on their feet and have the spotlight be on them to be able to come up with it.
I'll say this, Jim, because I've had the privilege of being in some of your executive meetings. So there's family, but sometimes family is tough love too, or asking the tough questions. And what I love is that there's no free passes. The love is there, which we know, but you guys ask each other and me some really tough questions as well.
Yeah, they don't let me off the hook. They give me a hard time all the time. You know, if I'm late for a meeting, they're like, "What? You couldn't be here on time?" And it's like, so they don't let me off the hook. And that's, like you said, it's like family, but there's a trust. So we want to be able to hear the toughness. And you know, you have the people that you check in. Hey, did I go overboard? Am I, you know, hey, why'd you go soft on him? You know, and so there's multiple times, but there's that mutual respect that we have for each other. And
I said that too. I remember one meeting where you were like 3 minutes late and they all called you out. So I was like, oh my God. I remember telling my wife and she's like, really? They did that? And I'm like, yeah, that's the culture. One last question, because I know you're a busy guy, but you've told this story a lot about when you gave up your book of business. And I think for founders of companies, when they grow the business, it's so personal to them. It's like they don't want to give up anything, but to get to that next level, we have to do things differently. So can you talk about that decision, how challenging that was, and then what happened after?
Sure, I get it. You know, you bringing that up is just bringing the emotion back in me. And it really, you know, it strips you of your identity in a sense. And here I was, and like closing a deal was where I felt success and I felt as if I was contributing and I felt I was doing something. And now all of a sudden, in order to grow the business, I needed to pull myself out of a individual contributor to be able to back it up and reinvent myself. But I had to give up that book of business. And looking back, one, my team told me I wasn't really good at that role anyways. That was very kind of them. Two, it took me 2 years to fully give it up because I was still trying to hold on to it. But that was really part of the start of me truly reinventing myself. And I went from an individual contributor to playing, you know, call it sales manager or coach. And then from there, I actually plugged in 2 people to do that position probably within 2 years after that. So try to reinvent myself again. And every time I do it, and I'm still trying to do it now, it's uncomfortable, but I know it's the right thing. And I have to get comfortable with the fact that I have to reinvent myself again. So I keep going.
I love that you used uncomfortable and the right thing. So what I want to do is, just before we close it, we can just go around the room. If there's one kind of aha or takeaway or insight that stuck with you, and then we'll wrap it up. So we'll go back to Joel.
Yeah, so Jim, thanks again for your time today. I think the thing that you reinforced for me that I love is this whole thing about seeing the person. And I think in any business, it can be tough, but especially in the business that you're in, you've got a lot of people doing a lot of work, and it's easy to see people as roles or employees. It's a tribute to a good leader to see them as people and to treat them as people. And so I really appreciate you bringing that out again. And yeah, thanks for your leadership.
Thank you.
I will say that what's most awesome about you and how you've developed and led your company thus far and continue to is just that keeping that sense of curiosity and the state of wonder and the state of like, I wonder what this might look like. I wonder what I might learn. I wonder who I should talk to. I wonder who might be good at, going from bookkeeper to, client facing to who knows what. And even again, connecting to the story of mentorship, finding mentors in possibly unlikely places is as simple as noticing somebody and going, hey, what's your story? Tell me about it. What can I learn from that? And I think that's probably deeply baked into your culture and serves the whole company really well.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun too.
I think the thing that popped out, and I wrote the word down very early on, and then you used the word when you were talking, is vulnerability. And I feel like you made vulnerability famous before Brené even spoke about it. It's become a topic and topical, but if you think of your whole experience of university and, your dad and it would have been easy to have just been this really strong, directive, power, control kind of leader. And you have just expressed in so many different ways the way that you've been vulnerable. And yeah, I'd love to give you a big hug and just go, wow, that's awesome.
I'd love to give you a hug back.
So I'm sending one.
Excellent.
She's just a short flight away, Jim. You can do that.
Well worth it. Well worth it.
Well worth it.
Fun,
yeah, for sure. Listen, so Jim, I'm a bit of a note taker. So as everything's going down, I'm writing stuff down, and I was looking at my notes, and I have 3 things that showed up, and I think this is a theme that I love. In the first story that you told, you talked about letting go. I just got to let go and let these people do it. In the story that you and you shared with me, you talked about stepping back. And then just at the end, when you're talking to Sean, you said, I just have to back up. And in each of those, it's like, let go, step back, and back up. It's just like, that's it, man. Like that's the whole thing. And if you want things to grow, you got to give it room, right? Because nothing can grow if there's no space. And, kudos to you, because I think, you've nailed this thing. So it's a pleasure having you here.
Great. Thanks. And
Well, thank you, Jim. I tease you, but when I tease, there's a true element of truth. And I said my next corporate leadership program is going to be called the Colludas Way. And I'm just dissecting what you do. Don't worry, I'll give you some royalties.
It's usual 2%.
Yeah. But in all seriousness, I've learned a ton from you and your team and just how you show up every day. Everything's a teachable moment, and really value the relationship. And that's the thing that comes out with me. Relationships come first with you, and I really value that. So we can't thank you enough for being a guest, for being brave enough or silly enough to come on this show. Last word goes to you, Mr. Kaloutas.
Yeah, you guys got me to reflect a little bit more and to just think about, how am I making that impact and how do I continue to make it? So yeah, I have to keep investing, keep staying curious. It's interesting that you, Todd, you brought up the whole backing up and giving them room. yeah, I think to continue to do that and to give that. But then the other thing, I think it was it Catherine or Mandy? I don't remember the aspect of being the directive leader. But there was something in there about I was all hugs at the beginning. I had to learn the directive leader or all the different stages of it, and then realize, come back to my roots and letting go of the wheel again and making room for other people. So it's been a journey, and the journey continues, and I'm still learning. So, but thank you for having me. I learned from you guys watching your video and your content, and I appreciate you guys.
Good. And I want to thank you again. And to everybody that's a big fan of this show, if you like it, you can share it with others. Please hit the share button, hit the like button, put comments below. To my other 4 colleagues and friends, thank you for this. Jim, thank you. Our next episode of the Power of 5 is coming out really soon. We'll see you then.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Jim.
See you, Jim.
So good
Thanks,
to
guys.
talk.
Thanks, guys.